dokie, we are live. Welcome everyone to the next lecture in our St. Luke's Idaho Clinicians for Climate and Health Learning series. Today we have a really exciting session with several speakers talking about children's impacts on the climate around them and how the climate is impacting children's health. We are trying to bring some focus to vulnerable populations this year and young people who are going to be exposed to the changed climate for a longer period of time certainly fall in that area. So we'll have several speakers throughout the course of our year's programming that will focus on how kids are becoming involved in climate action and how climate is impacting their health. Don't forget to sign up for the rest of our lecture series. We've got some really exciting topics coming up in March, April, and May, including talks about extreme heat, how farm workers are specifically impacted by climate change, and also a talk from Gundersen Health System about their journey to becoming the first healthcare system in the world that was energy independent. And one last thing I'd like to share is that we have a joint climate and health symposium that we're hosting in Boise, Idaho at St. Alphonsus Hospital, put on jointly by St. Al's, St. Luke's, the Boise VA, and Idaho Clinicians for Climate and Health on Friday, May 16th. The registration website will be open next week, and I'll have a link that I can share with everyone at our next talk. But it's going to be a really exciting day, lasting from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., targeting clinicians and healthcare operators alike. So with that, I will kick things over to our first speaker, Dr. Lori Byron. Lori is a general pediatrician who is also married to a climate advocate and internist, Dr. Robert Byron. She has practiced pediatrics for 27 years on the Crow Indian Reservation, now working part-time as a pediatric hospitalist. She's an instructor at Johns Hopkins on their climate and health program, and just completed a term on the Children's Health Advisory Committee to the EPA and the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on Environmental Health and Climate. Along with Rob, they co-founded and co-chair the Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, and were really some of my first mentors in getting Idaho Clinicians for Climate and Health off the ground. So forever indebted to Lori and Rob for their support. And she and Rob are authors of the 2021 Climate Change and Human Health Special Report of the Montana Climate Assessment. She's the founder of and organizer of the AAP's chapter of Climate Advocates program, and was honored to serve as the medical expert in the Ricky Held versus State of Montana trial, which she'll touch on a bit just now. So please welcome Dr. Lori Byron.
Thank you. Let's make sure that screen sharing works. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yep, you're looking good.
Great, okay. Thanks so much. And I can't wait to hear Olivia and Hadley today because the youth give us a lot of energy and a lot of hope. So I had my career with Indian Health Service, and near the end of it is when we got involved in climate work. So I did a lot of public health work and advocacy work, but not in climate change during my time there, while also working in the ER and delivering babies and doing general pediatric sorts of stuff. But in 2011, we had a flood at the Bighorn River. And it was one of those 500-year floods that we see a lot more than we used to see, a whole lot more than every 500 years. And the interstate was closed for a couple of days, and the hospital flooded, and we got to deliver medicine to patients in little boats and stuff. So that was kind of fun. But about a week later, the interstate opened, and if you drove by, you really wouldn't think that anything had happened. And it just seemed like it was all over, except that we lived in the community, and we saw that it wasn't all over, because we saw people who had their drywall ruined, and they couldn't afford to repair their home, or they lost their car in a flood, and then they couldn't get to work, and so then they lost their job. And so what we saw was that years later, there were people that were still living in a spare bedroom, or living in a FEMA trailer, or living in a car with their family. And it hit home so much to see this climate injustice happen in my own community. And that's sort of when we so I retired from medical practice and have been doing full-time climate work since that time. So today, I'm not going to talk about the fact that particulate matter from burning fossil fuels gets through the placenta and into our fetuses and damages them. or that it gets through the blood-brain barrier and damages our brain, including the risk of dementia and ADHD and autism. And I'm not going to talk about the fact that particulate matter is a foreign body. And as that, it causes what's called oxidative stress in our bodies that increases heart attacks and strokes and obesity and diabetes and some cancers, and most likely a lot of other ailments that we haven't even started to look at yet. And I'm not going to talk about the fact that heat endangers our fetuses and increases all forms of violence and increases premature death and lessens our ability to think and learn and work effectively. But what I would like to talk about today are some patients, some children and young adults. Most of the pictures are not of the actual people. I'd like to talk about Jeffrey, who was born with pulmonary sequestration, a condition that makes his lungs more at risk to exposure from wildfire smoke. Their family had to move out of Montana due to the wildfire smoke, disrupting their way of life and impacting their economic security, which of course greatly affects our health. Ruby is a Native American child, and she has visited the ER multiple times for asthma attacks, including during wildfire smoke events. Claire is an avid cyclist and cross-country runner. She saw the asphalt melt under her bike tires due to extreme heat events in Montana. She had cross-country practices canceled or moved indoors due to heat, which limited her athletic career. Sariel is also Native American, and her tribe's cultural practice of huckleberry picking has been impacted by extreme heat, changing the times that the berries ripen. And this alters the cycles that they have practiced for hundreds of years. For place-based people, this is really traumatic. Georgiana is on a scholarship to college for cross-country skiing. She experienced lack of snow and inability to train on many occasions in Montana because we have far fewer snow days than in the past. Ricky is a true ranch kid in eastern Montana. She witnessed extreme weather destroy their crops. She saw livestock die due to heat and drought and wildfire. And for anyone who farms and ranches, you know this is really painful. And in addition, it affects your family's income, which also affects your health. Eva had a bridge to her home wiped out in one of those 500-year floods. Excuse me, this resulted in a greatly lengthened commute to school for her and to work for her parents, and eventually resulted in her family having to move away from their cherished rural home life into the nearby town. Lander and Badge and their family subsist on game, but the ability to hunt and fish has become more difficult in Montana and probably Idaho due to changes in weather patterns and warmer streams. This interrupts their way of life and also their income because money must now be spent to buy what they were able to get from nature before. These are just some examples of the 16 youth who sued the state of Montana in 2022, plaintiffs who had their lives changed by climate. They were not asking for financial recompense, but they were asking that the state do its job to protect their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. One of the greatest honors of my life was being asked to be the expert witness to support these plaintiffs in the Held v. Montana case, the first constitutional climate case to go to trial in the United States, which happened almost 2 years ago. And then the upholding of the decision by the Montana Supreme Court happened a few months ago. It was probably the greatest climate victory in this century for those of us who care in Montana, but it was also pretty special around the world. The examples above are not unusual. Millions of kids and young adults in the United States are experiencing climate change events. They have the feeling that they're losing their home when they're still in their home, a condition called solastalgia. Many of us adults feel it too. For some people, the pain paralyzes them and they can't act. And for those, professional medical assistance is needed. But fortunately for many of us, including the 16 kids and young adults in Held, and including the people on the call today, for many of us, action is the antidote to despair. And acting on climate really gives us hope. And there's a lot that you and I, everyone listening today, can do. First of all, find a group. We derive strength from our peers and we can do greater actions together. And then, with our time or our money, support our youth in what they want to do. Help with the green team at school or help them find outlets if they aren't aware of what they can do. And support the EJ communities and the at-risk communities also in actions that they want to take. For healthcare providers, we're among the most trusted messengers, including on the topic of climate change, which has been researched in recent years. So introducing the topic of heat or wildfire smoke or extreme weather when we have patient encounters is occurring more and more. I work as a pediatric hospitalist now, and I rarely have a night shift where I don't admit a teen with a suicide attempt. It's not often volunteered, but when you ask them, despair about the condition of the earth and climate change is frequently part of their feeling of hopelessness. We are a trusted voice in the community. So showing up for council meetings when there's city planning or water rights or safe streets are being discussed, all of which affect climate change, or showing up at a PTA meeting that's discussing the new HVAC system that they need, which would also affect climate change. All of those things are examples of way we can use our voice in our communities. Testifying before legislature on bills that are good for climate or bad for climate, and writing to our members of Congress and writing in the newspapers. Working with groups where we are already involved and trusted. So that might be greening in your church, and almost all churches have resources on how to do this. Doing the climate change 4-H module with interested kids in your county. Creating a local scout badge on climate, which one of my colleagues did in California. Join the Idaho Clinicians for Climate and Health, and they can help you find actions that fit your talents. And as Bill McKibben entitled his picture book on climate for kids, we are all better together. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lori. That was a real storytelling of how so many people have been impacted by climate change. And we are excited to welcome one of those people next as our next speaker. Olivia Vasovich is a passionate climate activist and artist currently pursuing degrees in English and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at the Davidson Honors College at the University of Montana. She is a plaintiff in the groundbreaking Held versus Montana climate trial, where she advocated for the enforcement of constitutional environmental protections. Through this case, she's been able to become a climate educator, speaking up for youth engagement and empowering students to take action. As a Gen Z advisor for the Climate Mental Health Network, Vasovich is developing a toolkit aimed at helping young people cope with climate-related mental health issues while empowering them to become effective activists. Her work blends activism with art, reflecting her deep commitment to social and environmental justice. She's driven by her love for the natural world, community, and creativity. In her hometown of Missoula, she works in mutual aid organizations like Seedlings for Solidarity, where she helps expand equitable access to seeds and seedlings. She believes that access to stable climate systems for nourishing food and great education are all basic human rights. Her work is dedicated to ensuring these human rights are upheld. So please welcome Olivia.
Hello, let me screen share. And sorry, my document is taking a second. Okay. Sorry. Technical difficulties. Okay. So here is me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. That was so sweet. And this is Adolescence, the Climate Crisis, Considering Youth Rights and the Collective Action and the Role of Developmental Science, because our case had a lot to do with science, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without people like Lori helping us and guiding us. And so a little bit about what our Children's Trust is. Our Children's Trust is the only nonprofit in the world dedicated towards the constitutional rights of children, and they help us have voices and power in the courts, because courts are how civil rights have been granted for generations, and so this is why we decided to fight for our rights in the court. And so these are two of our plaintiffs. That's Lillian and Ruby. And the climate crisis is the single greatest driver of health for every single child born today, as Lori said. And we've all grown up in an environment where we have known about climate change our entire lives. And so these are the plaintiffs. And being a plaintiff in this case has been one of the most powerful and amazing connective experiences of my life. I got involved in this case when I was 16 years old, and I was looking for an outlet I think that as youth, our voices are never listened to, and Held versus Montana is this case where youth voices mattered so much, and it actually changed our state for the better. And I just think that that is so powerful. I remember the moment that I decided that I wanted to be a plaintiff. I was 16 years old, and my local science, one of my high school science teachers, he knew that a couple of us were really involved in local climate action, and he got us involved. He gave us the email of Nate Bellinger, who was the senior staff attorney on our case. And I started interviewing and talking about how I'd been impacted by climate change. And I honestly didn't think that my own climate story mattered that much. I was kind of doing it because I wanted to, but I didn't think that my voice mattered as much as it did. And through this process, I learned that every single person in this world has a climate story, especially youth. And every single person's story matters. And I think that's the real power of this case, was that our lawyers were able to build up this beautiful narrative of a bunch of different Montanans who have different values and different hopes and dreams. And they were able to bring them together in this narrative that was able to help us all fight for this state that we all love so much. That's one thing that all of the plaintiffs were really connected in, our love for Montana and our love for the climate and our love for this state. And that's why we got to do it, because we have a really cool constitution in the state of Montana, which gives us the right to a clean and healthful environment. And our state has not been fulfilling the policies that align with this constitutional provision. And so we fought on the grounds of our right to a clean and healthful environment and our rights to property, the pursuit of happiness, and all of those other constitutional rights that climate change also violates. And yeah, which is this slide. And what a really cool thing about the Montana Constitution is that youth enjoy the same fundamental rights. We are protected under that amendment. And so here is some of the art that I've made in trial. I made both of these pieces when I was 16 years old, so it was around the same time that I was getting involved. And I see art as this powerful way of communicating and also a form of solace, because we are in this time where climate change, as Lori was saying, youth feel this in despair. Youth feel this in anger. Youth feel this particularly extremely, because how is a person supposed to imagine what their future will look like when they can't even imagine what the future of the planet looks like? And so I made these pieces. I'm really honored that they got to be brought into trial, because this case presented climate mental health and physical health just as normal and natural things, and not stigmatized at all. And so I'm really grateful that I was able to display how climate despair makes me feel. And so the painting is a painting of Gaia, who is Mother Nature, and she's crying. And it's also, there's hope, because one of my grounding things recently has been my hope has claws. Hope is something that we fight for. Hope is our weapon in these times. Hope is not something that is just given to us. It's something that we work for and we work to create. And that's exactly what this case has done for me, because there hasn't been environmental policies being passed, and we've been having them stolen left and right out from under us. But now that this is a constitutional provision, and it's upheld in this specific way, I feel a lot more hope that we can create the world and that we want to live in. And these are some of the other plaintiffs. And so in the green blazer is Georgie, and swearing in is Grace, and speaking is Badge. And these are all such wonderful, impressive people. And the real power of this case was that we each had our own unique stories that were able to explain them. And Lori talked a little bit about it, but Georgie is a skier, and skiing is really important to her. Badge is really, really like hunting, and fishing is really important to his family. And then Grace worked this past summer as a rafting guide. And so we're all in Alberton Gorge. And so we're all really connected to our state, and it's beautiful. And then this is Sarah Yell, and these are two pictures of a huckleberry bush. The first picture on the left is the huckleberry bush, that how they healthily look. The other one is an unhealthy version. And as Lori talked about, these are a source of food. People's food sources are being stolen from them. And these are our experts. And as you can see, there's Dr. Byron. And we had some of the most brilliant experts ever come and support our case and support and have climate science actually in the court system, which was so powerful. And it was clearly impactful because both the Supreme Court of Montana and the state court both believed and listened to these experts. They were able to provide so much context to youth, because youth voices matter so much, and yet we don't have the same knowledge and the same shared life experience and the same brilliance of these people. And so these experts were able to help our cases be understood and adding some grounding to them. And so, yeah, Dr. Byron talked a lot about children's health. And so I also have asthma and exercise-induced asthma. And so smoke is very detrimental to my health as well. And so most of the plaintiffs have a similar respiratory issues, which is really sad to think about, that a lot of these plaintiffs all have respiratory issues. And so there is this increased risk of children, and it's physical and it's emotional. And that's where Dr. Lise Van Sesteren came in. And I think that this is one of the most powerful things to know, that climate mental health is normal. And it's not something that needs to be stigmatized, and it's something that needs to be understood to a greater extent. And that's why I've been working with the Climate Mental Health Network, because I think that we all need to take care of our own mental health in this time. You can only fight for so long, and you can only care for so much. Every single person I've ever spoken to has always said that they feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they feel the weight of the climate on their shoulders. But what I want everyone to remember, and I think by us talking about how climate change makes us feel, it's a reminder that other people are feeling the same way, and it is okay to feel this despair, to feel enraged, to feel sad, to feel unheard. And that's when we can, and when you can acknowledge these emotions and process them, that is when you can start transforming your despair into action, because activism is medicine. Activism is medicine for the earth. It's medicine for the soul. Being in community with each other, being in connection, and growing and listening with each other is, I think, all we can do at this point. And winning was literally the coolest thing ever. I know that none of the plaintiffs, none of us understood. We all had this wild dream of oh my gosh, wouldn't that be so cool? And I think we all knew deep down that this is the right thing, but how often is the right thing done? And our state, the Montana, did the right thing. And we now have climate change in our Constitution, which is so empowering. and really speaks to the power of what youth can do when we are given the tools and when we are uplifted by past generations. And I think that so many youth have this kind of anger and resentment towards the past generations for not doing what they should have done. But I know that people have been fighting for climate change since they knew about it. Since scientists started understanding what it was, people have been on the front line and people have been trying to explain this, and that's exactly what these experts did. They've dedicated their lives to climate justice, and they were able to help us enact climate justice with their own expertise. And so, yeah, this is a really cool thing. The director of the Columbia Law School said that this is the strongest decision on climate change issued by any court, which is amazing. And this does not come easily from him. And so I just think this case is a precedent-setting case. This is not one, we're not meant to be living in a bubble. We don't want just climate justice for Montana. We want climate justice for the entire United States. We want climate justice for the entire world. And our case is just one case to start to get the ball rolling. And we have proven our injuries, and it is, yeah, there's just a lot of us proving our injuries. And I think that this case is one of the most spectacular ones that I've ever gotten to be a part of. And it really speaks to the power of the youth. So thank you guys for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Olivia. It's such an empowering story. And I think it really strikes a chord with something Lori said about action being the antidote to despair, which is something I've always felt in my own life. And I hope, and it sounds like you found that as well, by getting involved, you're finding a way to relieve some of the anxiety and grief that you're dealing with the way the climate has changed. So next, I'll introduce our final two speakers, Jenny Wolf and Hadley Dermott from the City of Boise and the Boise Youth Climate Action Council. Jenny Wolf works on climate change and education and outreach at the City of Boise for the Watershed Education Center. For the past year, she's focused on supporting the development of climate change exhibits for the watershed, which is transforming into the nation's first climate and water science center. Prior to joining the City of Boise, she spent 7 years working as a backcountry guide and naturalist in Southeast Alaska. She holds a master's in natural resources from the University of Idaho. In 2023, she was chosen by the Idaho Environmental Education Association as Idaho's Environmental Educator of the Year. Hadley is the co-chair of the Boise Youth Climate Action Council for the City of Boise and has been a member of this cohort for the last 2 years, where they focused on housing and waste management. She loves to swim, downhill ski, and backpack with her dogs and her family. She first became engaged with climate action when volunteering with her mom on Boise River cleanups, and her goal as a member of YCAC is to get more youth engaged and passionate about community-based climate action. So please welcome Jenny Wolf and Hadley Dermott.
All right. And how's my screen looking there, Ethan?
Good.
All right. So I'm going to start us off, but then really hand over a book of this time to Hadley. But together we're going to be bringing some of what Olivia and Dr. Byron have been talking about to a real local Boise context. And I want to just take a moment to thank both of them for their work. They've been really inspiring to us as we've worked on heading the Youth Climate Action Council. And Olivia is actually going to be our plenary speaker at the Youth Climate Action Summit that takes place locally. And Hadley, I know, is going to talk a little bit more about that. So to get us started, I think it's quite striking that all three presenters at this point have talked about the impact of climate change on youth mental health. So this is a graphic that we have adapted for the Watershed Education Center from the Climate Mental Health Network. And again, it's just quite staggering the effects that climate anxiety are having on our young people. And for me personally, this survey is done every year, but the last year's survey showed that 63% of young people think that the government is not taking their climate concerns seriously enough. So as someone that's working in public service, this statistic is something that I think we need to take some accountability for. And at the bottom there, you can see the breadth of emotions that youth respond they feel when it comes to climate change. And as Dr. Byron said, I think that there's a potential for youth to feel overwhelmed in the face of climate change. And what the Youth Climate Action Council tries to do is to take these emotions and motivate them toward action rather than despair. So one of the ways that we have done this is through forming the city's Youth Climate Action Council. So for a little bit of background on this program, in case you've heard about it in the Boise community, this actually started in 2020. And really early on, we did a perception inventory where we brought together a group of young people and teachers to ask them how they viewed current and existing climate action initiatives within Boise. And so we asked them questions such as the questions that you see in the bullet points here. So we asked things such as, adult leaders, do you view youth as valuable resources for your community? To our youth participants, we asked if there was meaningful opportunities for them to be involved in climate action. And through these questions, what we found is that, at least in Boise, youth respondents said that there was a lot of opportunity for them to participate in things like youth climate strikes or efforts to make their voices heard to our senators. And that work is really important. But what we heard from our community was that there was less opportunity for students to be involved in sort of the boots on the ground, project-based efforts towards climate action. So knowing that there was anxiety within our community, knowing that there was maybe more of a desire to have project-based climate action initiatives, we started our Youth Climate Action Council. So it's currently in its 4th year, and Hadley is going to speak about what it's like to be a participant in this program. But I want to end my section a little bit with what having this Youth Climate Action Council has done for the city of Boise. Because it really is a two-way street. We get to learn a lot from them, and we connect them to resources that they might not otherwise have. So from the city perspective, last year, the Youth Climate Action Council spent an entire year focusing on how heat disproportionately impacts marginalized members of our community. They actually worked alongside physicians to create kits that could be donated to shelters to help marginalized people exist more comfortably as our city warms. And what that resulted in from the city's perspective is that it really elevated heat mitigation planning as a priority for us. We are one of the fastest warming cities in the United States. And when our youth council told our city leaders that it would be a good idea for us to have a heat mitigation plan in place, that really resonated with them. And so that top picture that you can see there is from an urban heat study that was done in partnership with the Treasure Valley Canopy Network and the Idaho Conservation Corps to find out more about where heat is impacting our city. In the middle there, this is a result of one of our Bloomberg Youth Climate Action Fund projects. So last year, through a grant, the city received $50,000 from the Bloomberg Climate Action Fund, and that $50,000 went toward youth-led projects in the community. So in that middle picture there, you can see a waste audit that was performed at a local elementary school. So the organic waste hauler in Boise had been hesitant to add elementary schools to their service, but when they heard that youth were interested in it and invested in it, they reconsidered their stance. So this would not have been accomplished without student involvement. And the work that was done by these students has opened the door to potentially divert 1,000 pounds of food waste every day from the Boise School District. So instead of going to the landfill, that has the potential now to go toward composting. And then finally, at the bottom there, you can see our mayor with last year's Youth Climate Action Council group. And I really like to point out to our students that our mayor actually started her political career as a former city commissioner. So by giving these youth opportunities to engage in a meaningful way with their community, we are hopefully creating leaders who can shape better policy for our future. So my last plug before I hand this over to Hadley is that cityofboise.org /climate is a resource that you can direct young people in your life toward to both apply for the Youth Climate Action Council. We accept applications for that on a rolling basis. And also, pretty excitingly, it was just announced that we would get our second round of Bloomberg grant funding. So we have $85,000 available for youth-led climate action projects. So if you know a young person or you're connected to groups of young people who are looking to make an impact in their community, please direct them toward that link so they can apply for some of that funding. We have up to $5,000 available for up to 17 youth-led climate projects. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Hadley to talk from her perspective about the Youth Climate Action Council.
Thank you, Jenny and Ethan, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm Hadley again. I'm a senior at Bishop Kelly High School here in Boise, and I am one of two co-chairs of the Youth Climate Action Council with the City of Boise, and it is my second year on the cohort. So just a quick little background. I've grown up in Idaho. I'm a third-generation Idahoan, and I have grown up backpacking, hiking, skiing, the whole 9 Idaho yards. And I think that I first got exposed to really the true impact of climate change in my neighborhood. I used to live on an acre just outside of Southeast Boise, and everyone in my neighborhood irrigated all summer. And so growing up in Idaho, I had been exposed to the wildfires and had understood the impact that climate change had on our community, but not on a personal level. I had kind of accepted the smokes and the fire every summer is just kind of a part of what being in Idaho was like. And I think that I first started realizing that's something that shouldn't be normal for a teenager or a kid living in their city to have to not go outside during the summer because of the smoke. So I first started personally realizing the impact that climate change had on my life during summer irrigation. So I would take over irrigation in the summer from my mom to irrigate our acre and our garden and our fruit trees. And so I would have to manage that with my other neighbors. And when the drought started hitting, I started realizing when we would have shorter water and how that would impact everyone within my community. So from there, we headed into COVID. And I think this is where my negativity, I guess is the right word, started around climate change, because I think that as a teenager in COVID, my family took the COVID lockdown very seriously. We went no contact with the outside world whatsoever for about a year and a half. And so all of my information on climate change was being pushed on me by social media. And I think that this is a really common thing for teens my age, because that is where a lot of our information is sourced from, is from these social outlets. And I think that a lot of times these can be pushing really negative statistics. And so I felt really overwhelmed, really out of control during this time. I felt like there wasn't anything I could personally do within my community. And then I started volunteering, as mentioned during my bio, with my mom to do Boise River cleanups. And so this is where my perspective on climate change started shifting towards something more positive and more action-based, because I felt like I had a tangible impact in my community, and I felt a sense of solidarity with the other members volunteering, and there was a whole range of individuals from totally different demographics and backgrounds. And so working with these people helped me understand that no matter where you come from, living in Idaho, we're all united over our love for our river and our environment. So from there, I really wanted to apply for the Youth Climate Action Council because this was a council that I felt like had a voice within the city. And I wanted to engage with other youth and to find out what they were passionate about. My connection was to the water. That's what I love. That's what I'm connected to. And I wanted to see what other things they were interested in as well and kind of see where we all united over this. Jenny, can we move to the next slide? Thanks. Sorry, guys. So with YCAC, I got accepted, and we do 2 main events a year. So at the beginning of the year, we are presented to by 3 branches of the city, and we get to choose a presentation or a group that we align with personally. So then the group takes that project that they click with and spend all year educating ourselves and moving towards a big project at the end of the year. So last year we partnered with Our Path Home to focus on, as Jenny mentioned, housing and more marginalized communities and how heat in Boise is impacting them. And then this year we're focusing on Curbit, which is our waste and disposal and management branch of the city. And we're hoping to focus on textile management. So additionally, I'm going to focus on the project in my next slide a little more. So I'm going to dive into the summit. So at our annual summit, schools come from all over the valley to one event, and Olivia's speaking at it this year. We're very excited to have her. And in this event, we have our main speaker, Olivia, and then they then get to break out into 3 breakout rooms of their choice. So based on our theme, we then invite 3 other speakers, and all of the students at the event get to choose a speaker that they feel like they align with their message to go into the room and educate themselves on their personal experience and hear their story. And at the end of the event, we all break off into our school groups and we create a climate action plan for our school. I think that was honestly the most empowering part of our summit last year for me, is that I was able to see diverse youth from all over Boise all coming together and sharing their ideas. And last year we implemented a new aspect of the summit, and we had all of the groups go up and give kind of a 5 to 10 minute little presentation on their plan for their school. And that was the part that really touched me the most about the summit last year. It's what stuck with me. It's what I remember, because I just remember seeing the diverse amount of focuses that all of the schools had. Every school had something different, and it was just so interesting to see the range of ideas that came from this presentation and that the youth in Boise had come up for their community. And I think that can be really inspiring, especially when struggling with the negativity of climate change in our world today, is not feeling like you have something that you can do. And so I think that being able to create a solution that's feasible and enactable in your school is so important and so awe-inspiring for these youth, and can really create that hope that allows them to take that next step and continue engaging with climate action within their school and within their community and take that next step forward. Can we do the next slide, please? And then here's where I kind of want to dive in and focus, is it's the impact that I feel the most connected to with YCAC. And so that is our yearly project. So again, as mentioned at the beginning of the year, the 3 branches of the city come and present to us, and all of the presentations are always great. It's always a really tough pick for our group. But once a focus is selected, we then become experts on the topic. And this is always a really fun process. Last year we had different groups of nonprofits and different organizations come and present to us on their organization's impact and their personal experience, how they got into it. And it really helps us understand the topic on a deeper level. And throughout my experience with YCAC, I've found that it's honestly shocking to me the amount of professions that have to consider this in their daily jobs and their lives. And it's something that's become really interesting to me, because I didn't realize the spectrum of jobs that there was that had to think about climate in their day-to-day lives. It's something that I think about, but I just didn't consider the spectrum on the climate scale. So this year, me and my co-chair Ji Song, we decided that we wanted to immerse YCAC within the community and really get our members out there. So we implemented a new field trip program. So we did field trips this year to the landfill, the Republic Recycling Center, the Root Zero Waste Market, which was the first zero waste market in Idaho. And I want to say maybe nationwide. That's might be a little bold of me. And then a textile workshop with Dr. Astrid Snodgrass, who is actually later going to be helping us with our project for this year and teaching us about recycling textiles and different materials. So these field trips were really impactful for me this year because I felt like it immersed YCAC with intangible situations and solutions this year that I didn't feel like we were exposed to last year. And so I think that this going forward, seeing people working within their personal environments and within their elements is really important to how we shape our topic, because I think that with a lot of the projects that we're creating, it is so important to be exposed to this when we're approaching our solution and what we want to focus on. And it really helps us figure out what we as a group connect to personally and exposes us to things that we might not have thought we would connect to. Like, I never personally thought that I would be most drawn to a textile project. And that honestly it just clicks with our group so well. And it's the most unexpected things that we are finding ourselves drawn to and really wanting to focus on. Um, with last year's project, we ended up doing a Beat the Heat block party. So we took all of the information we had gathered from last year about lower income communities or homeless communities and how the heat is impacting them. And we decided to put up presentations with the information that we had spent all year learning and had taken that to in front of Whitman Elementary School. And we allowed everyone to do a pass, like a little circle through, and look at all of the information we had collected and kind of do a quick summary of what we had learned. And then we had our drive, and we focused on collecting supplies that we had learned would be most impactful towards assisting this community in the future. So whether that was directed towards things that would help them be a little healthier when getting out in the heat, or just things that would help them in their day-to-day lives managing the impact of that heat. So we were able to create, I think, almost 200 heat kits by the end of the drive, which was a really good turnout for us. But then at the end of the year, and this is something that multiple YCAC members have expressed to me as the most impactful part of their year, is the presentation to City Council that we got to give at the end of the year. So by presenting to the city leadership, I feel like we take all of our information and we put it on a presentation and we kind of overview the impact that we think the city should consider moving forward, the information that we've learned, and how we think they should consider this in future policies. So for me, this is really important because I think that, similarly to how Olivia was talking about earlier, youth don't often feel like they have a voice. And so by presenting to city council or members of city council and members of the city of Boise, we were really able to feel like we have a voice in a community. The youth do get to dictate where our future is going. And it's really an empowering feeling to sit up there and know that you're being heard. And just having the ability to voice your project and what you've dedicated a big portion of your life to over the last year is just a really empowering feeling to know that they are acknowledging your work and they are considering that going forward, that we do have a voice and we do have an impact within our community, and that so many different youth and different voices from so many different backgrounds all get to collaborate over this one united cause and have a voice within our city. And so just drawing that back around, I really want to thank you all for giving me and all of the other youth of Boise and just a voice for YCAC, and for taking the time to listen to me today, because I really appreciate you giving me that time of your day to talk about that. So thank you so much.
Really outstanding, Hadley. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today. We've got time for about 10 minutes of Q&A. So if you've got questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll sort of filter through them and try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to start off with a question for Dr. Byron. Lori, you've had such an amazing career as a clinician, but maybe even more so in a second act as a climate activist. How can you advise clinicians who are in the audience today in finding what their best niche, their best role in this second career is? I think in my own experience, the finding a second purpose within your medical career really allows you to be a better clinician and be more engaged and happier in your current job. So how do you think people can best find this second career?
Well, first of all, I don't have the name right at the tip of my tongue, but there's a climate Venn diagram about finding your joy and kind of the sweet spot in the middle of the diagram. So when you look at what you're good at, what you can do, what you like to do, and what needs to be done, if you're a good writer, if you're a good public speaker, if you're good at just listening to people, all of those things sort of gauges if you're a researcher or you know how to edit well. I mean, I think all of these skills can be used. And I think that people in the audience connecting with you guys and seeing what you're doing and, maybe coming up with even new ideas for the future. Yeah.
Great. For both Dr. Byron and Olivia, you touched on the fact that the Held versus Montana is seen as a potential stepping stone for other climate action. Is this an opportunity that is unique to Montana with the way the Montana Constitution is written? Or is this something that you're seeing other state youth activists take action on already?
This is something that other state youth activists are already taking on. As I said before, our Children's Trust is an organization that is dedicated entirely to protecting youth's constitutional climate rights. So we have a case called Juliana versus the United States, which is suing the federal government for their role in climate change. We have one in Virginia that's trying to go through. We have one in Utah. There's one in Florida. We're working on, there's a lot of different states that are doing this, or that are a part of this movement. And the reason why Held versus Montana was able to go for, we're the first constitutional climate trial, and we're the only state that has gone to trial. Hawaii was going to go to trial, but they just made a settlement deal, and they were suing the state transportation department. And so now in Hawaii, they are going to be zero carbon emissions by 2050 in their transportation sector, which is really exciting. And the youth plaintiffs have a role in helping that transition, which is so cool. So that's a unique, the state settled. Our state did not settle. Our state fought it. And so this is only the beginning, but Montana had a constitutional provision that had the right to a clean, healthful environment. So, and a lot of states don't have that, but Hawaii has some things along those lines. So states where they don't have any environmental provisions might see a little bit more difficulty getting to trial or being supported in their courts, but it's not something that's going to deter youth.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this with some other folks who weren't involved in the trial, and it seems like the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in and of itself is impacted by the changing climate. So if this is something that can be interpreted that broadly, it seems like there's scope for a federal lawsuit if one's not coming already. So I'd be interested to see how that goes. Lori?
Sorry, I was typing a reply in the chat.
No. Say it out loud. Go for it.
No, I missed it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So for Olivia and Hadley, most of our audience today are not young people. Most of our audience are people like me that are in the throes of their career and struggling to try to feel like grown-ups. And I think a lot of adults especially older adults, think of climate change as a young person's problem. But we know that climate change is already impacting our health today and probably has been for 20 years at least. Um, and I think that gives older generations sort of license to not get involved because they feel like it's not their problem. But we know that young people have fewer resources and less legislative reach, less agency in government than older people. So, taking that into account, how can my generation and older generations most effectively support efforts of younger people and help alleviate some of the climate angst that you're experiencing?
Well, and so the attitude that you suggested that some people have is probably the worst attitude to have. We caused the problem, and it's not our problem now; it's yours. So dumping it on the kids is the last thing we want to do, or the young adults. And that's why I really feel like, sort of like when we're doing research nowadays, when we're doing anything in medicine, we're used to telling people what to do, but we need to be listening and we need to be supporting. So when the kids already have a project, what can I do to help? Can I attend? Can I give you money? Can we, get other people to attend with you? Just being involved in what at-risk communities and what youth are doing is one of the most important things.
I also think that a lot of people don't feel like climate change necessarily impacts them as a individual, but in Idaho particularly, I know that almost everyone I know does feel a personal connection to the environment, and everyone has some sort of recreational outdoor activity that even if they're not consciously connecting that with climate change, I think that finding that connection especially for adults that have that attitude of it doesn't affect me, it doesn't concern me. And I even find this with youth people. They're like, it doesn't necessarily directly impact my life. Why should I be acting? And I think that it's finding that connection that this is something that you enjoy doing. You love being outside, you love hiking, whether it's taking your dogs for a walk, all of it is connected. It's all intermixed. And so I think that finding that connection and something that you can relate to someone on and help make that connection in their mind and help them start consciously realizing that the things that they enjoy are endangered by climate change is a really big turning point for a lot of people. And I know that my parents have been so endlessly supportive in all of my climate work. And I just think that listening and I think that Dr. Byron, your point is so good, and that people are so used to telling other people what to do that they're not very receptive. And I think that understanding that the youth do have their personal experiences and allowing them to have that voice to express that to you and being receptive to what they're saying is so important.
And
All
that,
right, just a few go ahead, Olivia.
oh,
Let me hear what you have to say. No,
okay.
go.
Just really quickly, just make sure that you always put youth voices first and you understand. And I think that the worst thing you could say is like, oh my gosh, well, I'm so sorry. Now we've left this mess for you to clean up. And it's like, that's the worst thing you could say. And every single older person that I know and I work with has never said that to me, or at least never said it to me without also helping youth and listening to youth, and use your power, use your resources, use your connections to uplift youth voices and give them platforms exactly like this, is what we can do. Also if for younger kids, treat them like they're smart and respectable. Like youth know what's going on, and you don't need to treat them with like gloves. Just treat them like, talk to them normally and treat them like the autonomous humans that they are.
Yeah, I love Dr. Howard Frumpkin, who's been a speaker on this podcast before, has a great slide about hope. And you really have to acknowledge the problem, acknowledge people's grief, be honest about what people are actually dealing with, not try to sugarcoat things, but not try to terrify people, because once you get to that crippling state of fear, or you get blown off and ignored, it makes engaging with action much more challenging, and also sends people into a deeper sense of despair, because again and again and again, action is the antidote to despair. And I just want to close things today by thanking everyone so much for their time, so much for the great work you're doing in the community, from Dr. Byron and Jenny to Olivia and Hadley, to show that this is, everyone's problem, and this is a health problem, first and foremost, and not a political problem, but something that in order for us to have a livable, healthful future, we all need to work on. And that's why we're bringing a topic like this to a climate and health learning series, is because this is a healthcare problem primarily. Just one last reminder, no one can do it all. No one person's going to solve this alone. And I think one way that people get overwhelmed, myself especially, is by trying to take on too much, and trying to feel responsible for too much. And if you find a problem you can be involved in, like that Venn diagram that Lori and Jenny were referencing, that is in your wheelhouse, that's really a way that you can become empowered to feel like you're doing something about the problem, because you are. And so I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing, the work of the Boise Youth Climate Action Council and how it uplifts people. Just one last question for Jenny and Hadley. When is that Youth Climate Summit? And is there a way that other folks can get involved at this point still?
Yeah, we'll be reaching out to local community members. We do have, we call it our career fair, but we wait for YCAC to give us the list on who they want to be represented there. And then the attendees are high school students. So unfortunately, we can't invite all of you to join us, but we'll definitely be celebrating the work done at the summit afterwards. And probably a lot of you will be reached out to represent your different networks at our career fair.
Great. And again, one last plug for the Climate and Health Symposium that we're putting together on Friday, May 16th. That will really, I think, be a full day training course for clinicians and healthcare professionals that want to get involved in this kind of work. So Friday, May 16th, from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The mayor of Boise will be there to give some remarks. So the city will be involved, as will a lot of other folks. So I appreciate all of your time today, and we will see you in March with Gunderson Health Services.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That was awesome.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your guys' day. I'll see you two on Zoom later. But
See you tonight, Olivia.
bye.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, Hadley. Nice job.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Ethan, did you stop the recording? Oh, yours.